Hey everyone, it's Ashley with Southern Sewing Company. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am sharing my favorite baby quilt pattern with you and how to personalize it. Let's get started. So the Lattice Baby Quilt pattern is one of my absolute favorites and a baby quilt that I keep making over and over again. The pattern was created by Amy from Diary of a Quilter, and it's beginner friendly and charm pack friendly, which is one of my favorite options. So check the link in the description box below to get started with your free pattern. Amy does a fantastic job walking you through from start to finish on her blog post. I cannot do as good of a job as her detailing how to make this baby quilt. So instead, I'm sharing some tricks on how to make piecing this quilt together even easier, and then how to personalize it or add a baby's name to the bottom corner of the quilt. So check the description box below, go ahead and get started with your fabric, and I'm gonna meet you in the layout portion and kind of show you how I do that and how I start personalizing things.
First stop is laying out your blocks. So check the blog post for details on how to make this portion even easier, but to make sewing go a little faster for me, I skipped laying out the in-between block sashing pieces, and instead I lay them next to my sewing machine and sew those on as I go rather than laying them all down and then picking them all back up. Now, if you're trying to personalize this quilt, you're going to omit the 3 squares in the bottom corner and those sashing pieces, and instead fill it with a 16.5 by 5 inch block. Next, I'm going to take you to my sewing machine and show you a couple tips for sewing the quilt top together to make things even easier. So each row begins and ends with a triangle piece. Refer back to the pattern to make sure you're using the right size, as the 4 corners of the quilt need to be the smaller size triangle. Once you know the correct way that your triangle needs to be sewn to your block, I like to line up the 90-degree angle of my quilt block with the angle of my triangle, and this helps to ensure that I'm sewing the triangle on perfectly straight. I usually sew things row by row, starting with the triangle piece, and then I'll piece together a block with a sashing piece and kind of move down the line. And then I'll start sewing those together to kind of keep things moving. This is definitely a create in one day kind of quilt, which is my favorite kind. Once we get to our personalization row, which includes our 16.5 by 5 inch block, we're going to sew the triangle pieces right to each side of these. And remember, we omitted any kind of sashing in the middle. So just sew your triangle pieces directly to this block as a regular row and kind of keep moving after that. Once my triangles and sashing pieces are sewn onto the rows, this is what things look like so far, and I like to lay them out just to make sure everything looks good. Next is our sashing pieces. So you're going to lay your sashing strips way past the end of the triangle on each row, and this is because once you flip open your strips, you have to connect the next row after that as it's on a diagonal. So definitely make sure that you leave plenty of room at the beginning and the end of each block with your sashing pieces. It's easiest for me to lay out the rows together, flip them on top of each other, and then you're going to take that sashing piece, open it up, and start pinning your blocks together. And you know that things are straight if you open up the blocks like I am here and make sure that the sides of the blocks are all the same. It's very easy to get off track with this quilt, so definitely don't skip this step and do it for each of the blocks to make sure that they're all lined up correctly. Before I start sewing, I like to open up my rows to make sure everything looks right, especially on these side pieces. The edge of your triangle should kind of do one continuous line, and you can kind of see that as I have it set up here. And that way, when you are squaring your quilt at the end, you know that it's going to be a nice straight line. Our quilt top is sewn together at this point, and we're going to measure the open space that we have to figure out how big we want our name. This is a 14-inch ruler. I knew I wanted it to be a little bit bigger than this, maybe about 16 inches. So next, I'm going to show you how I create the name. I got my name from PicBunky, printed it out, and now I'm going to upload it into my printer app so that I can resize it for my quilt. And this is how I do all of my baby name quilts. There's a full tutorial on how to make them inside my YouTube channel. Once I get my name uploaded, I know that the page that I'm looking at prints out to be an 8.5 by 11, which is a standard size sheet of paper. So when I resize something, I'm going to enlarge it enough so that what I see on my page, I can scoot over and know that the first page, okay, the LAI is taking up one entire page, which is 8.5 inches. And if I scoot over, I know that the NEY is taking up an entire other sheet, which is also 8.5 inches. Since I want 16 inches, this is what I have here. I'm going to individually print these pages and then show you what I have next. My name is printed out into 2 pages. I'm gonna take my rotary blade and trim off this extra 1/2 inch or so, and then tape my 2 names together. Next, I'm gonna take my handy dandy Crayola tracing pad, which I use for all of my projects, to trace my name upside down. Definitely important, put your name upside down. And then I'm gonna put my heat and bond light on top of it and trace onto the paper side. So take your time here, trace your name onto the heat and bond light. Once I'm finished, I'm gonna rough cut it out and hop on over to my ironing board where I'm gonna lay my backing fabric face down and put my name on top to fuse. So refer to the package instructions for your heat and bond light to figure out exactly how to do this, but you can check the description box below for links to all the products that I'm using in this video. Next, we are going to take a pair of detail scissors and we're gonna cut our name out very carefully. After that, we're gonna go back to the sewing machine, remove the paper backing from our name, and position it onto that blank block that we sewed into our quilt top. So make sure that everything is nice and straight. Definitely take your time here. One way you can double check this is by grabbing a ruler and lining it up one of the straight quilting lines in your quilt, and then making sure the edge of your ruler is lined up with your name. And then follow the package instructions on the heat and bond light to fuse your name to the quilt top.
So once you have your name fused onto your quilt top, you can either sew like 1/8 of an inch around the entire name to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, or you can do what I'm about to show you, which is go ahead and sandwich your quilt together, and as you're quilting, once you get to the name, go ahead and free motion everything. So if you're planning on using a walking foot for this portion, I would go ahead and do the name first before you start quilting, but let me go ahead and show you how I do it and you can make your own decision.
Today I'm quilting Lainey's quilt with a swirl with a hook and kind of an all over free motion design. And what I did was once I got to the corner and got to her name, I started going around the entire name as close to the edge as possible without going over. So free motion the quilt, got to the name, I stopped and sewed her entire name in. Really take your time here, and if this seems too daunting, you can definitely use your regular foot and sew this in first, which is a lot easier, but this way saves me a lot of time, so this is how I usually do it. Once I get to the end, I go right back into free motion quilting, and I couldn't really decide if I wanted to leave her name without quilting on top of it to make it stand out. And you can see here that I kind of made a little decision to go ahead and quilt over her name, which I think keeps things kind of uniform, so that's all here. After squaring and binding, Lainey's quilt is complete. To keep things a little smaller, I don't do the outside borders, but I think the quilt ends up perfectly beautiful and ready for Lainey, and I hope that she loves it.
I hope you enjoyed these tips on how to make this beginner baby quilt. Leave a comment below if you've decided to make one for yourself or what do you think about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more, or tag me with your creations on Instagram at Southern Sewing Company. Thanks, y'all.